What would you do if you discovered the person you loved most in this world wasn't who they claimed to be? For Sheriff James Carter, the truth came too late, and it cost him everything. Hey, don't forget to like, comment your thoughts, please subscribe for more shocking crime stories, and hit the bell icon. The darkest truth are yet to come. Detective Clara Hayes stepped into the dimly lit living room of the Carter residence, her boots clicking softly against the hardwood floor. The air was thick with tension, broken only by the faint crackle of embers in the fireplace. On the floor sat Sheriff James Carter, his hands trembling as they clutched a smoking revolver. His wife, Evelyn Carter, lay lifeless near the hearth, her once elegant face frozen in shock. Clara knelt beside him, her voice calm but firm. "Sheriff, what happened here?" James didn't look up. His eyes were hollow, staring at the blood pooling around Evelyn's body. For a moment, there was silence, only the sound of James' ragged breathing. Then he whispered, almost to himself, "I didn't know who she really was until today." The words hung heavy in the air like storm clouds, leaving Clara stunned. Who was Evelyn? And why had James killed her? Before Clara could press further, James dropped the gun and buried his face in his hands, muttering something unintelligible. Whatever secrets this house held, they weren't going to be easy to uncover. To the residents of Pine Ridge, James and Evelyn Carter were the perfect couple. James had served as sheriff for over 2 decades, earning respect for his integrity and dedication to justice. Evelyn, on the other hand, was the town's creative heart, a talented interior designer whose work adorned many homes in the area. She was also known for her charitable efforts, organizing fundraisers and community events that brought people together. Their marriage seemed idyllic, filled with laughter, shared dreams, and mutual admiration. Neighbors often commented on how well-suited they were, calling them the golden pair. But perfection is rarely without cost. Beneath their polished exterior, cracks had begun to form unnoticed. Small arguments grew more frequent, and Evelyn's late-night absences became harder to explain away. Still, no one, not even James, suspected the depth of the deception lurking beneath their seemingly flawless lives. Lately, Evelyn's behavior had grown increasingly erratic. Once composed and confident, she now appeared anxious, jumping at every unexpected noise or glance. Late-night phone calls became a regular occurrence, though she always ended them quickly when James entered the room. Her trips out of town also multiplied, each time accompanied by vague explanations about design projects or client meetings. At first, James dismissed these changes as stress from her demanding career. After all, Evelyn had always been meticulous and hardworking. Yet his instincts, as sharp as ever from years on the force, told him something wasn't right. He began noticing small details. A forgotten receipt from a hotel he hadn't booked, a faint scent of cologne unfamiliar to him, and an uneasiness in Evelyn's eyes whenever he asked too many questions. Something darker was brewing, but James couldn't yet put his finger on it. One evening, while Evelyn was in the shower, James heard her phone buzz on the kitchen counter. Curiosity got the better of him, and he picked it up, intending to silence it. Instead, he answered reflexively when a male voice spoke. "We have the results. It's time." The line went dead before James could respond. Moments later, Evelyn emerged, wrapped in a towel, her expression shifting from surprise to alarm when she saw the phone in James' hand. "Who was that?" he demanded, holding up the device. Evelyn hesitated, then forced a smile. "Wrong number," she said dismissively, snatching the phone back. But her hands trembled as she scrolled through recent calls, erasing evidence of the conversation. That night, James lay awake, replaying the cryptic message in his mind. What results? And why did Evelyn seem so terrified? A few days later, Evelyn announced she needed to visit Denver for supplies related to an upcoming charity gala. Though skeptical, James let her go, watching silently as she packed a suitcase and left early the next morning. By noon, he tried calling her, only to find her phone switched off. Texts went unanswered, and panic began to creep in. He spent hours pacing their home, replaying memories of their relationship, searching for clues he might have missed. Was Evelyn having an affair? Or was it something worse? As the sun set, James decided to take matters into his own hands. He called contacts at local hotels in Denver, hoping to track her down. Each dead end fueled his growing paranoia. Whatever Evelyn was hiding, it was big enough to risk everything, including their marriage. While Evelyn was away, James stumbled upon a text notification on her phone. Robert, results confirmed. Time is short. The name struck him like a punch to the gut. Robert? Evelyn had mentioned a brother once, decades ago, but claimed they'd lost touch after a falling out. Could this be the same person? Determined to learn more, James dug deeper into Evelyn's past. Online searches yielded nothing concrete, but fragments of information hinted at a troubled history. Records showed Robert had been involved in legal disputes years earlier, though specifics were scarce. Why would Evelyn reconnect with him now? And what results were they referring to? Every new discovery raised more questions than answers, pulling James deeper into a web of lies he never imagined existed within his own home. When Evelyn finally returned, she looked pale and exhausted, dark circles underlining her eyes. When James confronted her about her trip, she claimed she'd undergone a minor medical procedure in Denver, a fibroid removal, she said, waving off his concern. But inconsistencies plagued her story. First, there was no record of her admission at any hospital in Denver. Second, her demeanor suggested guilt rather than recovery. James pressed her for details, but Evelyn grew defensive, snapping, "Why don't you trust me?" Her reaction only deepened his suspicions. That night, unable to sleep, James sat alone in the study, staring at Evelyn's untouched suitcase. Inside, he found a crumpled receipt for a private clinic, one specializing in DNA testing. His heart sank as realization dawned. Whatever Evelyn had been hiding, it wasn't just infidelity, it was something far more sinister. Sheriff James Carter couldn't let go of the gnawing suspicion that Evelyn was lying to him. The crumpled receipt from the private clinic in Denver haunted him, its implications too significant to ignore. As a seasoned investigator, James knew how to dig deep without raising alarms. He discreetly accessed police databases and cross-referenced hospital admissions under Evelyn's name, but found nothing. No surgeries, no procedures, not even a routine checkup. Frustrated but determined, he broadened his search to include nearby clinics and hospitals. That's when he stumbled upon something peculiar: records of a man named Robert Clark, admitted for an emergency kidney transplant. The timeline matched Evelyn's trip to Denver. Could this be the same Robert mentioned in her texts? If so, why had Evelyn lied about undergoing surgery herself? James felt a chill run down his spine as he pieced together fragments of evidence. Why would Evelyn claim she needed treatment when it was actually her brother receiving medical care? And what role did she play in all of this? His instincts screamed that there was more beneath the surface, a secret so profound it could destroy their marriage. With each new discovery, James grew closer to unraveling the truth, yet farther from the life he thought he knew. Determined to get answers, James tracked down Robert Clark at the hospital where he was recovering. Sitting beside his bed, James introduced himself cautiously, claiming to be investigating potential insurance fraud involving Evelyn's medical claims. Robert hesitated before admitting they were twins and explained that Evelyn had volunteered to donate one of her kidneys to save his life. But as Robert spoke, James noticed subtle signs of evasion, a flicker of discomfort in his eyes, pauses too long to feel natural. "There's more to this story, isn't there?" James pressed. Robert looked away, refusing to elaborate further. Though unsatisfied, James left with a growing sense that Evelyn's secrets ran far deeper than a simple organ donation. James' mind raced as he replayed the conversation. Robert's evasiveness hinted at a larger conspiracy, one that Evelyn clearly didn't want exposed. Was she protecting herself or someone else? The unanswered questions weighed heavily on James, driving him to dig even deeper into Evelyn's past. Whatever the truth was, it wasn't going to come easily. Later that evening, James confided in his old friend Dr. Michael Hart, a trusted physician who often consulted on cases requiring medical expertise. Over coffee, James casually mentioned the twin revelation, prompting Michael to ask, "Did you know identical twins are always the same sex?" The words hit James like a freight train. Identical twins share the exact genetic makeup, meaning they cannot differ biologically in gender. His mind raced as he connected the dots. Was it possible Evelyn hadn't been born female? Had she undergone some form of transition before they met? The idea seemed impossible, yet fragments of evidence pointed toward a darker truth, one that threatened to unravel his entire world. James spent hours researching the science behind identical twins, desperate to disprove what he feared most. But every article confirmed the same fact: identical twins are genetically indistinguishable. This revelation shook him to his core. If Evelyn truly had a twin brother, then she must have been assigned male at birth. The implications were staggering, forcing James to confront a reality he wasn't prepared for. Haunted by doubt, James dove headfirst into uncovering Evelyn's past. He spent sleepless nights combing through public records, birth certificates, and archived documents. Finally, buried deep within sealed adoption papers and medical files, he found what he dreaded most: proof that Evelyn had been assigned male at birth. Further research revealed she underwent gender confirmation surgery in her early 20s, years before they met. Each discovery cut deeper than the last. Memories of their shared life flooded back. The laughter, the intimacy, the promises, all tainted by the realization that Evelyn had kept such a fundamental part of herself hidden. James wrestled with conflicting emotions: betrayal over her deception, anger at being lied to, and lingering affection for the woman he still loved despite everything. The weight of these revelations crushed him. How could Evelyn live with such a monumental secret for 2 decades? Did she ever plan to tell him, or was this a lie she intended to carry to her grave? Every answer only led to more questions, leaving James trapped in a spiral of confusion and despair. 4 days, James wandered through their home like a ghost, unable to focus or find peace. Every object reminded him of Evelyn: their wedding photo on the mantel, her favorite scarf draped over a chair, even the scent of her perfume lingering in the air. How could someone he loved so deeply keep such a secret from him? He oscillated between rage and despair, replaying moments of their marriage in search of clues he might have missed. Yet, amidst the turmoil, memories of happiness surfaced too: the way Evelyn supported him during tough cases, the quiet evenings spent talking about their dreams. These recollections softened his heart, making him question whether her intentions were truly malicious or if fear drove her silence. Love and betrayal waged war within him, leaving him emotionally exhausted. James tried to rationalize Evelyn's actions. Perhaps she feared rejection or judgment, especially in a small town like Pine Ridge. But understanding her motivations didn't erase the sting of betrayal. Each passing hour brought fresh waves of anger and sorrow, leaving him unsure of how, or he could ever move forward. Finally, James confronted Evelyn. Standing in their living room, his voice trembled with barely contained fury. "Were you ever going to tell me the truth?" he demanded, holding up the documents he'd gathered. Evelyn froze, her face pale as she realized the extent of his knowledge. After a long pause, she nodded slowly. "Yes," she admitted, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I was born male, but I've always identified as female. When we met, I wanted a fresh start. I was terrified you'd reject me if you knew." Her voice broke as she pleaded for understanding. "I didn't mean to hurt you, James. I just wanted to be loved for who I am." Though her explanation offered context, it did little to ease James' pain. Betrayal burned in his chest, mingling with the love he still felt for her. The weight of 20 years of lies crushed him, leaving him unsure of what to do next. For the first time in his life, James felt utterly lost, caught between his duty as a sheriff and his humanity as a husband. The confrontation reached its boiling point. Evelyn's confession hung heavy in the air, filling the room with an oppressive silence. James paced back and forth, his mind racing with conflicting thoughts. Suddenly, without warning, he stopped and reached for his service weapon tucked inside his holster. Evelyn gasped, backing away instinctively. "James, please," she cried, her voice trembling. "Put the gun down. We can work this out." But James stood frozen, his hand shaking as he gripped the revolver. The tension in the room was suffocating, each second stretching endlessly. Would he pull the trigger? Or could reason prevail in time to prevent tragedy? James' breathing grew ragged, his vision blurred by tears of rage and heartbreak. He thought of all the years they'd shared, the love they'd built, and the lies that now poisoned it. In that moment, he teetered on the edge of destruction, unsure whether justice or vengeance would win. The breaking point had arrived, and neither of them could predict what would happen next. As James stood frozen in the living room, the weight of Evelyn's confession pressing down on him like a leaden shroud, an explosion shattered the night silence. A loud firecracker detonated outside, startling both James and Evelyn. In that split second, James' nerves snapped. His finger reflexively tightened around the trigger of his service revolver, and the deafening crack of gunfire echoed through the house. Evelyn staggered backward, clutching her chest as blood bloomed across her blouse. Her eyes widened in shock and pain, locking onto James' face as if searching for answers or forgiveness. She collapsed to the floor with a soft thud, her body crumpling like a marionette whose strings had been cut. For a moment, time seemed to stop. James stared at her, the gun trembling in his hand, disbelief etched into every line of his face. What had he done? The room spun around him as reality crashed back in. He dropped the weapon and fell to his knees beside Evelyn, his voice choking on sobs. "No, no, no, no," he cried, pressing his hands against her wound in a futile attempt to stop the bleeding. But it was too late. The bullet had struck her heart, and her life was slipping away before his very eyes. Realizing the gravity of what he'd done, James scrambled for his phone and dialed 911. His voice shook as he barked out their address, begging the operator to send help immediately. "Please hurry. My wife's been shot," he shouted, tears streaming down his face. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but there was nothing they could do. Evelyn's pulse faded under their frantic efforts, and one of them finally placed a gentle hand on James' shoulder. "I'm sorry," the paramedic said softly. "She's gone." James sank to the floor, cradling Evelyn's lifeless body in his arms. Her warmth was already fading, leaving behind only the cold shell of the woman he had loved and now killed. Guilt surged through him like a tidal wave, drowning him in regret and despair. How could this have happened? Had his anger blinded him so completely that he would destroy the person who meant the most to him? The enormity of his actions hit him all at once, and he let out a guttural scream that reverberated through the empty house. By morning, news of Evelyn's death spread through Pine Ridge like wildfire. Sheriff James Carter, once revered as a pillar of justice, was now sitting in handcuffs at the police station. Detectives grilled him relentlessly during interrogation, demanding answers about the shooting. James confessed everything, the confrontation, the accidental discharge, but insisted it had been unintentional. His colleagues watched in stunned silence, struggling to reconcile the man they knew with the crime he had committed. Some believed his story, others whispered among themselves, questioning whether years of pent-up frustration had driven him to violence. Regardless of intent, the fact remained: James had pulled the trigger, ending Evelyn's life. As he sat alone in his cell later that night, the full weight of his actions settled over him like a suffocating blanket. The town of Pine Ridge was divided in its response to the tragedy. Some residents sympathized with James, believing his reaction, though extreme, stemmed from shock and confusion. They pointed to Evelyn's decades-long deception as evidence that she bore some responsibility for the situation. Others were less forgiving, condemning James for allowing his inability to accept Evelyn's truth to escalate into violence. Meanwhile, Robert Clark, Evelyn's twin brother, vanished without a trace. Neighbors reported seeing him briefly after the incident, but he disappeared soon afterward, leaving behind unanswered questions about his role in Evelyn's secret life. Rumors swirled through the community, painting Robert as either a co-conspirator or an innocent victim caught in the crossfire. Without his testimony, the full story might never come to light. In the solitude of his cell, James wrestled with the consequences of his actions. Sleep eluded him as memories of Evelyn haunted his thoughts. He replayed their happiest moments together, the laughter, the quiet evenings, the promises they made, and contrasted them with the image of her lying dead on their living room floor. Slowly, painfully, James began to understand the prison he had constructed for himself, not behind bars, but within his own rigid worldview. His inability to accept Evelyn for who she truly was had poisoned their relationship long before the fatal night. He realized now that love wasn't about perfection or absence of secrets. It was about acceptance, even when the truth was hard to bear. Guilt became his constant companion, a shadow he knew he would carry for the rest of his life. There would be no redemption, no absolution for taking the life of the person he loved most. All he could do was vow to honor Evelyn's memory by confronting his own flaws and learning to see people not as he wished them to be, but as they truly were. Evelyn's funeral was a somber affair, attended by friends, family, and curious townsfolk eager to glimpse the woman whose death had shaken Pine Ridge to its core. The service was held at a small chapel overlooking the lake where she and James had often walked together. Among the mourners stood Robert, his face obscured beneath a wide-brimmed hat. He lingered near the casket just long enough to place a bouquet of white roses atop it, a symbol of purity and remembrance, before slipping away unnoticed. James, shackled and escorted by officers, watched from afar, unable to approach the grave or say goodbye. Tears streamed down his face as he whispered silent apologies to the wind, hoping somehow Evelyn might hear him. When the ceremony ended, the crowd dispersed, leaving only the sound of leaves rustling in the breeze. Evelyn's tombstone bore a simple inscription, "Beloved wife and friend." Yet James couldn't help but wonder if those words rang hollow now, tainted by the tragedy that had claimed her life. Weeks later, while sorting through Evelyn's belongings, James discovered a letter tucked inside a drawer. It was addressed to him, written in her elegant handwriting. The date at the top revealed she had penned it mere days before her death. With trembling hands, he unfolded the paper and began to read. "Dear James, if you're reading this, something has gone terribly wrong. First, let me say I love you more than words can express. You've been my rock, my partner, and my greatest joy these past 20 years. I'm so sorry for the secrets I kept from you. They weren't meant to hurt you, only to protect us both. I wanted you to see me for who I am today, not who I was born as. Perhaps I was naive to think we could outrun the past forever, but please know that my love for you has always been real. Thank you for giving me a life filled with happiness, even if it came with challenges I couldn't foresee. You were my greatest gift, even if you couldn't see me for who I truly was." The final sentence struck James like a dagger to the heart. He collapsed onto the bed, clutching the letter to his chest as sobs racked his body. Evelyn's words were a haunting reminder of the love they had shared and the opportunity he had squandered. In that moment, James understood the true cost of his inability to embrace Evelyn's truth. Love, he realized, required courage and vulnerability, not just from her, but from him as well. Though it was too late to change the past, he vowed to honor Evelyn's memory by becoming the man she deserved, not the one who failed her. And yet, the ghost of her final words lingered, echoing in his mind, "Even if you couldn't see me for who I truly was." That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Catch you in the next one.